Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us today. Welcome to episode 6, the final episode of season 1 of the S1 Tom Chat. Today I am joined by two, I would say InfoSec professionals. One's a complete poser, as you can tell by the way he's stroking his beard, and the other one doesn't take anything serious whatsoever. And also, as you can probably tell, my good friends, mentors, colleagues, people I really don't know why I trust them at all, but we have Mr. Andrew Agnês and Mr. Javvad Malik, who between the three of us, we make the Host Unknown trio that you may or may not have heard about. If you haven't, links in the show notes. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Tim. Big fan of your work.
Yeah. No, thanks for having us.
And there is the relationship all in one. I mean, Andy was, this is actually the second time we tried to record this, because yesterday Andy was just sat back in his chair going, I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. I don't know. What is this all about? Nobody told me anything. I
literally get a meeting request with a link to click on. I turn up and you guys are sitting there recording.
So you got a random email with a link and you clicked on it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this is why Andy. This is why Andy, you'll be so well positioned in the position of an exec, because you're just too busy to do any research. You're too busy to turn up to any of the pre-calls, but then you turn up and you complain about why you don't know what's going on.
I mean, there is sitting back in his faux leather executive chair with his pink shirt on. That's like a executive leader right there. Right?
There's a lot of hate going on in this call. I'm feeling some venom. I've clearly upset someone, and I need to understand why. How can I make this right? What questions do you have for me,
Concentrate and deliver. What can I say? Anyway, so the working title we had for this session was Levity, Humour and Fun in Information Security. And, hopefully anybody who knows us, who's met us at a conference, very rarely, maybe once, maybe twice a year, up until recently, of course, we would actually get together in person, all three of us together. It was quite a rare occurrence.
In the before times.
In the before four times, that's right. And but anybody who knows us know that we've known each other for quite a few years. I think, when was it? 2012, I think we first met each other.
Something like
2013, Host Unknown was founded. We still argue over who's the sole founder. I'm not going into that. Not after yesterday's debacle. But I think it's worth pointing out. In episode 2 of the show, I was chatting to Jim Shields, a mutual friend of ours, and said, he said security isn't funny, but it can be fun, right? And I think that's the point here, is what we do in Host Unknown, for instance, is to try and cut away all of that overt seriousness, the brevity, and actually bring it down to messages that make people want to learn more, and actually have some fun with it. Because frankly, given that as an industry we're measured by failure half the time, it's quite a tough and depressing place to work sometimes.
Yeah, and you can pretty much take any topic in the security industry, and you can just tweet an opinion on it and just watch two sides of the fence argue about it, for the next 3 days. It's so volatile. You can just light the torch paper and step back, which is why I think we have tried to address some common topics, in the industry: certification, risk acceptance, phishing, scams like that. We try and do it in the only way that we
Christmas
know is Christmas. The only way that is acceptable to everyone, which is parody gangster rap. So.
Yeah.
Parody gangster rap. It's a whole subgenre. Look it up. It's so true, isn't it? And Jav, I know that before we'd even met, you'd obviously made a name for yourself on YouTube, making not if not laugh out loud videos per se, they're not exactly jokes to them, but very light-hearted, but with a serious message to them, a serious undertone to them. to the point where even TV stations picked up on a couple of your videos about cryptography and things like that, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think there was two types of videos that I was doing. One was the more outward facing ones where I would try to take a security concept and think, well, how would a traditional YouTuber explain this in an engaging way? So something like cryptography, how do you explain that? SQL injection, how do you explain that? Just in a fun way with lots of jump cuts and sketches woven in and what have you. And the other side was probably something that we as hosts are known as perfected, is that more inward looking to the industry and saying, okay, how can we call out the absurdness of something without calling out the absurdness of something? It sounds like a TikTok challenge, doesn't it? It's but the whole thing.
Tell me you're absurd without telling me you're absurd.
Yeah, it's like the first video that really went viral, for lack of a better term, was the one I done about CISP, and I was like, you have a wallet and you CISP, it's like, and what it was an attempt to say, this is how ridiculous sometimes people take their certifications. They make out like now they have this, they are now some Billy Big Balls kicking down doors and rappelling down the side of buildings kind of thing. And that really resonated with people, because rather than addressing it in a manner that traditionally some people in our industry do, is like tweet out, I think certifications are useless, I would never hire anyone with a CISP, and then hit send. And to Andy's point, people then argue about it for 3 days. This sort of like, it was hopefully non-offensive to anyone that hold the point, but it held up a mirror kind of thing. And I think that's where humor really plays its part.
And I think you kind of got lucky on that, in that ISC Squared embraced it, didn't they? Yes. And you kind of became the poster child for them. Well, I think they saw the reaction to it, and they jumped on the coattails to ride that wave.
We'll have some of that.
Yeah.
It's funny because they invited me to come and speak at their member reception at ISC Squared Congress in Philadelphia, like after that video, like a year or so after. And I got an email from Amanda, who used to work there. She actually works with me now in my current job. We often laugh about it. But she sent me an email saying, we really love your video. Do you mind if we play it at the member reception? And would you be interested in coming along and giving a short talk? And my immediate response was, okay, but number one, you promised me this is not a ruse just to get me to the US so you can like arrest me and sue me for copyright infringement or something. You really are employed by IC Squared. You give me all these guarantees. And she laughed and she said, yeah. We absolutely, this is like totally legit. Because I was genuinely like, nah, there's no way a big corporation like IC Square would embrace something like that. But they did.
But what was interesting is that the popularity of the CISSP as it then became known, right, as a qualification, it actually took a bit of a beating, and not that long after that video, it kind of, the popularity went down in the sense that everybody was, there was a whole stage of people burning their CISSP certificates on the stove,
one
and stuff
person
like that. No, there was more than one. There was a bunch of them. I'm sure.
There's just one, and his picture
it got reused.
Yeah, that one image got reused by everyone.
They were just cheapskates, didn't want to repay their AMFs. That was the problem.
Well,
yeah, that's right.
You know what? There's two. When you look at the industry, there's the industry, and then there's the community. And the community have always been very vocal. They're the people that go to conferences and spend their time on Twitter. And they've always been very vocal and curmudgeonly and like critical of everything. And that's not represented. If you look at the membership numbers, they've consistently gone up year after year, especially since IC Squared have done a great job of making it a mandatory requirement if you want to work in like DOD or anything like that, or what have you. So it's
AOL marketing tactics of the old days.
Exactly.
Oh dear. But the first parody gangster rap video that we did was in somewhat of a response to that community feeling towards the ISC Squared, and it kind of celebrated it somewhat. But I think it was
it's
almost
different things to different
the
people.
timing was perfect. Is what? Sorry.
But the certification means different things to different people.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not a one-dimensional thing. It's a multifaceted thing. There's nothing wrong with qualifications. They're a good way of measuring commitment and measuring your ability to onboard and synthesize and process information and retain important facts and stuff like that, and also know where to look for things. But it was, I think as an industry, though, the industry took it in entirely the wrong direction.
So ordinarily, I'd argue with you for the sake of arguing with you, but I'm in agreement with you on this one.
What you mean? Our entire friendship is based on you just arguing with me for the hell of it.
I just like drilling for a nerve and just wait. Once I get it.
Oh man!
But you make that's a good point to segue, actually, because there's all of my memories of working with you guys is about laughing, mostly laughing, until 2019 when Andy didn't like the way the song was coming together that we found there. But that was
then the real Andy came out.
Exactly. That was less laughter, more visceral hatred. But why do you think humor is so effective? And certainly for basically three random blokes getting together into a room and just disagreeing with each other. Why is humor effective as a way of getting that message across?
What did Jim say in episode 2?
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah,
what he said.
Because he's very intelligent and he can articulate this stuff a lot better than I could. But I think it's just that shared. Humor is one of those things that is a shared emotion. That crosses borders, and language doesn't have to be that. You can find, different people in different areas can find the same thing amusing, and it does sort of just bring you together in that manner. Which is what I mean. I love humor in anything serious. Especially when it's really serious and it makes you think, did he just do that? In this really serious situation.
The gallows humor stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know what? It a lot of it is, in my opinion, it's about engagement. It's like, how do you engage with someone that they remember the interaction, or they find it memorable, or they adopt something as a result. And for that, humor is kind of like universally a good way. You can go about different ways. You can use sort of like dramatic or fear, or you can use all these other things which kind of like evoke an emotional response. But humor is kind of like the way that it leaves people feeling good about themselves, and it's memorable. I mean, that's why you could probably relate a joke you saw at a stand-up comedian make from 10 years ago, or a friend told you a funny joke, or a funny incident happened, and you can recall that down to the last detail. Like, he was wearing a red shirt and with green dots on it, and because of that, and it's just something you remember. But if you try to remember a presentation from last week that was given internally at work, you'd struggle to even remember what the title was. If anything, you remember some of the bad points, because in your mind you're making a joke like, look, his fonts don't even match, or something like that. And so that's why I think it's important.
I feel attacked with that last comment. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I mean, the quality of Andy's show notes for our Host Unknown podcast is shocking. Shocking, I tell you. So when isn't humour effective? When should we not be using humour? When you must have, obviously not with the three of us, but when have you seen it fail horribly?
At funerals, normally.
Although, to be fair, there are some events, like that guy that said he's going to have a band playing the tune to Pop Goes the Weasel at his funeral, and he's just going to wait for everyone's eyes as it builds up to the chorus, as they start looking at the coffin to see what happens. So I mean, it's all about the delivery. I think.
I'm thinking more InfoSec.
InfoSec related. Oh, okay, yeah, no. So I think the only time it's probably not appropriate is if you are communicating that you have had a breach and you're talking to the people that are impacted in that breach. So that's probably a bad time to try and crack jokes in that notification. But in terms of other areas, I think it's kind of fair.
Or if you're blaming them for the breach.
Oh yeah, joking about the intern being responsible.
Yeah. Or that fintech company in India that said all those records that are up on GitHub or whatever, those millions of records containing loads and loads of fields and data. Well, our own customers could have put them there, but nothing to do with us. I mean, if that was a joke, that was a really bad joke.
Yeah. I think you're right. There are lots of times where humor is not appropriate, but in many cases, especially internally, when you're dealing with stuff at work and what have you, things can get quite pressurized at a time, and humor is a really good release valve to kind of deflate some of that tension and get people down to a level where they can communicate with slightly cooler heads at that point. And so you have to think about how to de-escalate situations rather than everyone going into a frenzy, which happens quite a lot.
Yeah, and certain degrees of that humour can really help on that de-escalation. And actually, it also helps create good, strong relationships as well. If you have a shared, enjoyable experience and one that you can potentially repeat, that's a good way to build relationships, right?
Yeah, it makes people feel part of something. When they know what's coming, or they're in on the joke, or and that's where. I think slapstick, as an old genre, it was so successful at the time because everyone knew what was coming, and they knew what the punchline was going to be. But they're on that journey to get into that punchline. So
and the protagonist, it was the protagonist who was the butt of the joke, not the innocent bystander per se, not the the small kid crossing the street or whatever. It was the idiot protagonist, and to the people who say that Host Unknown is just a rip-off of Top Gear, for instance, yes, you're absolutely right, because the joke is always focused on the presenters, right? The joke is always about how stupid they are, or what stupid thing they have done, or what odd opinion or silly joke or whatever that they've said. It's never about the people around them.
Yeah, and I think we do try and avoid targeting specific people.
Jav sort of crosses that line occasionally, insulting guests.
Yeah, I mean, going after guests' family members, that's
that's low even for Jav. What episode was that? Was that episode 46? I think. If anybody wants to go back and look. So let's go back a little bit. I've known you both since what did I say, 2012, something like that. And known you both as like InfoSec people, and although Jav's changed jobs like his underwear, and Andy, you've pretty much been at the same company. I think
second company.
This is your second company since leaving school, right?
Which was 8 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, 8 years exactly.
I've aged prematurely.
What? That you've got the CISO haircut, I'm telling you, the recovering CISO haircut. So what was it that actually got you into information security? Because certainly, back in the 2000s, it wasn't really a career choice per se that you could go to university for, even sort of late 90s or whatever. So what was it that got you into InfoSec in the first place?
Andy just heard that if he was in the InfoSec department, he could look through everyone's personal folders on their shared drive.
I was an IT admin at the time. I could already do that.
Exactly. I was going to say, you only need to be an IT admin. Even I knew that.
Yeah. So login off. I used to have quite a long train journey into the office when I was working at a big corporate. Like my first big second real big job was big American corporate, and I used to travel into the office from like down in Kent, like big long train journey. I used to do a lot of reading on books, and there's kind of a whole load of things that occurred at the same time. So Amazon launched around the late 90s, and sort of like around 1999, I was getting books off Amazon, and I don't know how I got into it, but I read a book called Information Warfare and Security by, at then it was Dr. Dorothy Denning, now Professor Denning, and it had a foreword by Win Shorto, who I believe is one of Jav's colleagues these days. And it just really got me interested in security. They talked about how hackers, broke into credit reference companies, TRW, Equifax, and got records for Molly Ringwald, at the time, to look her up. And there's this whole genre that just really interested me, fascinated me about, what occurred and how they did that. And then from there, I got onto, the Cuckoos Egg by Clifford Stoll, the hacker crackdown. And then I went to my first DEF CON in 99, DEF CON 6. And it was just fun, and it was a combination of my age, a topic I really enjoyed, the access to the information at the time, but also at DEF CON, the gamification of, learning. You got the Hacker Jeopardy in the evening. They're combining drinking with, quizzes about hackers and technical knowledge and security knowledge. The in-between talks, to keep you there. You've got the Spot the Fed competitions. And so for me, it's like a whole combination of things came together at the right time, at an age where I was enjoying, I'm not going to lie, the alcohol helped a lot, to keep my interest. And it just kind of drove me on from there. And, from then you had the conferences, the good times of the .com era, the parties. And, it wasn't until, that bubble burst that reality sort of set in that, this is actually a serious thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can make some money from it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's obviously also a good drive. I think, certainly in the early 2000s, there's a lot of IT resource coming from other countries, where people were prepared to work for, lower salary. It's all big companies were looking at ways of reducing their costs, and they knew that they could get rid of these internal people that were costing them an arm and a leg, and replace them with people with a higher work ethic for half the cost.
Yeah. So I mean that Cuckoo's Egg book. My grandmother read that first, and then gave me the book.
Wow!
And that was one of my very first experiences of listening to it. And I always remember on one of the chapters, on the bottom of one of the pages, is his mother's cookie recipe. That my grandmother then recreated, because she liked the look of it, and so all I remember is that book and cookies.
But again, engaging kind of content. Ironic. He told a story about how security was focal.
Story, exactly. That's exactly it. And there was humor in it as well, humor and humility and all that sort of stuff. Everything that we've just been talking about, but more importantly, that story that was woven through it. So Jav, apart from taking down, major banks' internal systems, what was it that really drew you to the information security world?
Learning how to cover his own tracks when he makes mistakes. Self-preservation.
The only reason I mention it is that you've already declared this on our Host Unknown podcast, so it's public property.
So I done a sandwich degree where, like, you go to university for 2 years, you do a 1-year work placement, then you go back and finish your degree. And during that 1-year work placement, it was just like you're given this big directory and say, here's some companies, contact them to see if there's a work placement for you. So I contacted about 300-400 companies from it, got 3 interviews, 1 job offer for the year, and that was in the IT security team for a bank. And I had no idea what IT security was. It was pretty basic. At that time, it was mainly system administration, setting up accounts, resetting passwords, giving them access, checking audit logs and that kind of stuff. So I mean, I just got into the industry because after my work placement, they offered me a permanent job. They said, go back, finish your degree, and then come back and you got a permanent job with us. So I was like, fantastic. That's one less thing to worry about in life. And I thought nothing more of it. And then after that, I was working there for a few years, and I think the first penny drop was when I was in a meeting one time. It was like one of these project meetings, and they were like talking about this new system and design and everything. And they were great because you spend half a day there, have free tea, biscuits, and what have you, and then you'd be like, I've been busy for the day. But it was during one of these meetings that the project manager turned around to me and says, "So, what does security think about this?" And you know when you just almost choke on the rich tea that you just dumped in. Exactly. That was exactly what it was. It was a meerkat moment. It was. Of course, I was really impressed with how expertly deferred with that it depends, and let me check on the policy with you because it's recently been updated, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be XYZ. But it got me thinking, wow, this thing actually has an impact. It's actually being, higher profile than what it ever had been in the past. So that really got me far more interested in it. And then joining Twitter in the late 2000, sort of like 2009, I think, or something. I really got introduced to the wider community. I'd never been to the States. I'd never been to DEF CON or anything like Andy. But that really introduced me to a lot of the community and a lot of the people in it. I thought, wow, there are so many cool people in the industry, far more interesting than the boring colleagues I have at work who just clock out at 5 o'clock. There are people that actually, understand this and work on it after hours.
This.
Yeah, they live this, exactly. And then I started my YouTube channel, and then I got fully embedded within the industry, the community, and, got to know a lot of people. I think that's how I got to know Andy, who's now denying all knowledge of knowing him. But that's how I got to know Andy. And
he is, isn't it?
Yeah. And we met at, and it sort of like formed lots of friendships that I maintain to the day. So that's how I got into the industry, and that's what keeps me in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, many of us kind of do sort of fall into it by accident as well. It's not, certainly it was never a wholly conscious decision in of itself, right? It was just almost a logical next step, or somebody says this problem needs fixing, go do it. And I think that's not uncommon at all. So Andy, has your package been delivered?
It has.
Right, yeah, just
sorry
making
about that.
sure. I mean, it's
dangers
this whole
of
working from home thing. I know, right? This is a live podcast, but hey, it's fine, Andy. You do you. So we're coming to the last few minutes of the episode, and Andy, you're a practitioner at the moment. You work in risk management. Ultimately is what it comes down to. I don't want to sort of give the game away as to exactly what you do, because I'm not even sure you know that. But and Jav, you've definitely been a practitioner, but you certainly moved to the more sort of how can I put it, marketing side of things. You're an advocate for Know Before. You did a similar role before that. I've just moved into that role from being a CISO and a consultant. So we've all had experience at the coalface, as it were. What do you think, any CISOs or any heads of security listening today, what do you think, what should they be taking away from listening to this conversation and changing in order to, succeed a bit more?
So don't hire us, hire people that are going to do the work. Key takeaway. No.
Yeah. Definitely diverse hiring, because this isn't it.
Yeah. So I would always say there's if I was to advise a CISO, I'd say you only have to worry about two things. You can break everything down. Just worry about two things: everyone that works for you, and everyone that doesn't work for you. And when you start from there, you can build in the controls you need to support that.
Sound sage advice, Andy. Thank you. I may not be employed, half an hour after this episode goes live. But...
Cool. That's
Jav,
so good. So to channel Steve Ballmer, I'd say communication. Yes.
That reminds me of a video.
It's we sometimes security becomes so entrenched in the technicalities of what we can do. We don't stop to explain to people the value of it or how it's increasing it. So many times, it's some Royal Mail nearly went bankrupt several years ago when they tried to increase the efficiency of next day first class delivery from 92%. They wanted it to go up to 98%. So 92% of their first class letters were delivered the next day. But they said, no, we need to up it to 98%. And they nearly bankrupted themselves in the process. And they, at one point down the process, someone said, have you actually asked people what their perception is as how many first class letters actually get delivered the next day? Said, well, no, we haven't. So I said, why don't you just go out and do a survey of people, say, like, what percentage of letters do you think get delivered next day if they've got a first class stamp on it? And the average response that came back was 64%. People thought that only 64% of the letters they delivered, they posted first class, were delivered the next day. And so it came down to, if all they had done was communicate that 92% of their letters were delivered the next day, without actually investing in infrastructure or anything, by just simply communicating what they were doing, they would have increase their value in the eyes of the public who use the service. And I think that's a very good takeaway for CISOs out there. It's sometimes you worry about the 5 nines too much, or you worry about certain other metrics. I'd say focus on communicating what you do already do, because I'm sure you do a lot of great stuff that people don't appreciate.
So we can say that controls are actually effective at least 92% of the time. So we do get hacked 8% of the week, but the good news is you think it's a lot more. You're right. It's all about communication.
You know what? That's a message you want to communicate for people that do work for you. And then the people who don't work for you, you got a different message you want to communicate.
But it's a good point, especially when you look at as an industry and as a profession, it's measured on failure, right? We're in the news when things go wrong and when we're hacked, etc. But actually, there's a huge amount of work that actually leads up to the fact of us not being attacked, etc. So the communication of the things that you are doing and the successes that you have done will hopefully kind of sort of snowball into greater success rates in the future as people become more appreciative and understand what it is that you're doing, rather than you're just sitting in your office drinking tea while people are hacking us left, right, and centre.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. As defenders, you have to be right 100% of the time. Whereas attackers can only have to be lucky once. To get in, but the defending.
I really hate that quote. That's such a poor quote. That applies. What's
wrong with
it? It
that
works
quote?
For Andy every time. Yeah. He's kept his job.
60% of the time it's wrong. 100% of the time, yeah. So I think that applies if everything is as a silo. If every organization and every security control operates as a silo. But when you have things like threat intelligence, and when you have sharing, and when everything, an attacker only has to trip up once or trigger one thing, and you can actually secure not just yourself, but everyone else in that ecosystem. So I think it's not as so lopsided as that quote makes it out to be. I think that was true in the terms of the IRA trying to bomb Maggie, but I think in cybersecurity, it's an often ill representation of the reality.
That's an interesting example. I might have to take legal advice on that.
No, that's where the quote came from. That is where the quote came from. It's when IRA they tried to
really.
Yeah, they tried to bomb Margaret Thatcher in the hotel, and she wasn't there. Some other notable MPs were injured in that, and they wrote a letter in saying that you were lucky this time. Yeah. So we only have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky every time.
Actually came from the IRA.
Yeah. Yeah. Which explains a lot, seeing that
It's like a
Andy's
history
half
lesson.
Irish.
Yeah.
Probably his uncle that
Andy's
wrote the
half a lot
letter.
of things, as I understand.
Up the rock. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I have no political affiliation. God, I'm never getting into
I'm going to stop it here. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your stories, your insight, and for your trying to get me fired. Much appreciated. Jav, thank you so much for your time. Please stop clicking on your keyboard. It's really noisy. And Andy, thank you very much for your time too. Gentlemen,
Stay secure,
thank
my
you.
friends.
And
Stay
for our
secure,
listeners
my
and
friends.
viewers, thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the first season of the S1 Top 10. Bye-bye.
Hopefully you enjoyed the first season of the S1 Tomchat more than we did recording it.
We can't guarantee the quality of next season, but we do know that Tom will try his best.
Stay secure,